Imagine you're the wealthiest man in all of Rome, leading 40,000 of the finest soldiers across a scorching desert. Then your enemies march toward your lines carrying your own son's severed head mounted on a spear. This isn't some dark fantasy. This really happened to Marcus Licinius Crassus in 53 BCE. And what came next altered the trajectory of Western history forever. If you want to discover how a single brutal moment triggered a chain reaction that brought down the Roman Republic, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because this story is absolutely mind-blowing. Crassus wasn't simply rich. He possessed wealth equivalent to $170 billion in modern currency. But all that money couldn't purchase the one thing he craved above all else: military glory to rival Caesar and Pompey. So he launched an invasion of Parthia that would transform into Rome's most catastrophic defeat. But here's what makes this story truly brutal. It wasn't merely a military disaster. It was a father forced to witness his son's death in the most horrific manner imaginable. And that personal tragedy ignited the civil wars that ultimately destroyed the Roman Republic. This is the story of how greed, ambition, and a father's love collided in the Syrian desert to create one of history's most shocking military catastrophes. By the time we're done, you'll see why this single moment changed absolutely everything. Marcus Licinius Crassus possessed everything except the respect he desired. While Caesar was conquering Gaul and Pompey was dominating the Mediterranean, Crassus was relegated to being the financier of their three-way alliance. At 60 years old, this lack of recognition ate away at him constantly. The Parthian Empire appeared to be the ideal target: wealthy, far from Rome, and supposedly vulnerable. Exactly what Crassus needed to demonstrate he was more than just Rome's moneylender. Here's where things get fascinating. The Senate outright refused to declare war. They recognized this was a terrible idea, but Crassus didn't care. He had sufficient wealth to finance his own private war. In 55 BCE, he arrived in Syria as governor and immediately began preparing for invasion. Would you gamble everything for glory the way Crassus did? Tell us in the comments what you think motivates people toward such extreme ambition. Crassus gathered a massive military force: 7 complete legions, 7,000 cavalry, and 100,000 infantry, 4,000 cavalry, and 4,000 light infantry, nearly 50,000 men in total. Among his commanding officers was his beloved son, Publius, a battle-tested warrior who had served alongside Caesar in Gaul. Having his son present made this deeply personal for Crassus. But Crassus had absolutely no idea what he was marching into. The Parthians weren't the easy conquest he imagined. They were about to deliver Rome a lesson in warfare that would reverberate through the centuries. Spring 53 BCE. Crassus crosses the Euphrates River with his enormous army, confident this campaign will be straightforward. The early engagements went precisely according to plan. Local settlements surrendered, resistance melted away, and the flat desert terrain seemed ideal for Roman heavy infantry. But this was all part of the trap. General Surena, the brilliant young Parthian commander, was playing chess, while Crassus was playing checkers. Every Roman victory was actually luring them deeper into the desert, farther from their supply lines, into terrain perfectly suited to Parthian cavalry, but disastrous for Roman infantry. The Parthians weren't like other adversaries Rome had encountered. They didn't fight honorably, they fought intelligently. Their military was designed around speed and psychological dominance. Heavy cataphracts for devastating shock charges, and horse archers who could strike from distances far beyond Roman weapon range. The Parthian tactical approach was centuries ahead of its era. As the Romans pushed deeper into Mesopotamia, the psychological pressure intensified. Parthian scouts would materialize on distant ridges, just visible enough to keep Roman soldiers perpetually on edge, then disappear like ghosts. Supply convoys came under attack from invisible enemies. Sleep became impossible as strange sounds echoed across the nighttime desert. Crassus finally decided to make his stand at Carrhae, a small city that appeared to offer tactical advantages. He had no idea he was walking straight into the most sophisticated military trap in ancient history. June 9th, 53 BCE. The Battle of Carrhae begins at dawn. Crassus arranged his forces in traditional Roman formation, heavy infantry forming the center, cavalry positioned on the wings. His son Publius commanded the right wing. Everything appeared perfect in the morning light. Then the Parthians appeared, and the Romans realized they were confronting something completely unprecedented. Instead of a conventional army, they witnessed a purely cavalry force moving like a single living organism across the desert sand. Heavy cataphracts in gleaming armor, surrounded by thousands of horse archers flowing like water around obstacles. The battle opened with an arrow storm so dense it literally darkened the sky. But here's what made it absolutely terrifying. The arrows never stopped coming. The Parthians had organized sophisticated supply trains carrying thousands of fresh arrows, keeping their archers constantly supplied with ammunition. Roman shields designed to stop spears and swords couldn't withstand this sustained bombardment. Young Publius witnessed what appeared to be a Parthian retreat and made the decision that would doom him. He broke formation and charged forward with his cavalry, playing directly into Surena's carefully laid trap. The heavy cataphracts absorbed his charge while horse archers encircled his force completely. Separated from the main army, surrounded by enemies striking from every direction, Publius's force was methodically annihilated. The young commander fought with desperate courage, but the result was inevitable. Facing capture and the torture that would follow, Publius made his final decision. He ordered one of his officers to kill him rather than be taken alive by the enemy. But the Parthians had other plans for his body. What they did next would break his father's heart and shatter the morale of an entire army. The Parthians understood something most ancient armies didn't grasp. Breaking an enemy's mind could be far more devastating than breaking their body. Their treatment of captured Romans wasn't random brutality. It was calculated terror designed to systematically break enemy morale. Captured Roman soldiers faced horrific fates, specifically designed to maximize both suffering and psychological impact. Some were flayed alive, while their agonized screams carried across the desert to demoralize their comrades still fighting. Others were buried up to their necks in the sand and used for archery practice. The Parthians had perfected the art of keeping victims alive for extended periods while inflicting maximum pain. But perhaps most psychologically devastating was forcing captured Romans to fight each other to the death. Wounded legionaries who had fought shoulder to shoulder were given crude weapons and told the survivor would receive a quick death. These forced gladiatorial contests in the desert sand broke the bonds of military brotherhood that held Roman units together. The Parthians also employed water torture, giving captured Romans just enough water to survive while forcing them to watch their comrades die of thirst in the brutal desert heat. This created internal conflicts that destroyed military discipline from within. These psychological warfare tactics were incredibly advanced for their time. Subscribe if you want to see more videos about ancient military innovations. But all of these calculated cruelties were just preparation for Surena's masterpiece of psychological warfare. He had something special planned for Publius Crassus's body, something that would transform a military defeat into a personal catastrophe that would haunt Rome for generations. The young Roman's death was about to become the centerpiece of a psychological assault so devastating that it would shatter not just his father's sanity, but the spirit of an entire empire. Then came the moment that would define the Battle of Carrhae forever. Parthian warriors approached the Roman battle lines carrying a spear topped with Publius Crassus's severed head. The psychological impact was immediate and catastrophic. Surena had timed this perfectly. The Roman army was already demoralized after hours of constant arrow bombardment and watching Publius's cavalry get destroyed. Now they witnessed something that shattered the legendary Roman discipline: their general's complete psychological collapse. The Parthians didn't simply display the head. They paraded it slowly along the entire Roman battle line, ensuring every single soldier could see their commander's son. Then they began chanting in Latin, words learned from captured Romans, describing in graphic detail how Publius had died. Marcus Crassus, Rome's wealthiest and most powerful man, was reduced to a broken father staring at his son's lifeless face. Contemporary accounts describe him as unable to speak or issue orders for several agonizing minutes. His staff had to physically support him to prevent his collapse. This moment changed everything. Can you imagine watching your own child die like this? Share your thoughts on how personal tragedy shapes the course of history. The sight of their general's breakdown created a cascading effect throughout the ranks. Centurions who had maintained discipline through decades of warfare found their men beginning to panic. The legendary Roman military machine was disintegrating before the enemy's eyes. Roman soldiers who survived Carrhae would carry this memory forever. The image of their invincible general reduced to a sobbing father became a symbol of Rome's vulnerability and the personal cost of imperial ambition. As night fell, Crassus attempted to organize a retreat, but his army was no longer a disciplined fighting force. The psychological trauma had shattered the bonds holding Roman units together. The retreat became a massacre as Parthian cavalry pursued fleeing Romans through the darkness. The final act came when Surena offered truce negotiations. Desperate to save what remained of his army, the broken Crassus agreed to meet. But this was one last trap. During the negotiations, violence erupted and Crassus was killed. Some sources claim molten gold was poured down his throat as a final mockery of his legendary greed. The numbers tell the story of complete disaster. Of 42,000 Roman troops, 20,000 were killed, 10,000 captured, and only 10,000 managed to escape. 7 entire legions destroyed along with their sacred eagles. It was Rome's worst military defeat since Hannibal crossed the Alps. But the real damage was political. Crassus's death ended the First Triumvirate, the alliance that had maintained peace between Rome's most powerful men. Without his wealth and influence balancing their competing ambitions, Caesar and Pompey became direct rivals. The civil wars that destroyed the Republic can be traced directly back to that moment when Publius's severed head broke his father's spirit. The psychological warfare that defeated Rome's army created consequences that would reshape Western civilization. The severed head of Publius Crassus became more than just a symbol of defeat. It became the catalyst that transformed the entire Roman world. The psychological trauma inflicted on his father had consequences that echo through history to this day. The Battle of Carrhae shattered the myth of Roman invincibility. For the first time, a Roman army was completely destroyed not through superior numbers, but through superior tactics and psychological warfare. The lesson was unmistakable. Rome could be defeated by enemies who truly understood Roman weaknesses. Modern military historians study Carrhae as an early example of asymmetric warfare. Smaller, mobile forces defeating larger traditional armies through superior tactics. The Parthian use of mobility, ranged weapons, and psychological operations influenced military thinking for centuries to come. These ancient tactics are still studied by modern militaries worldwide. What do you think today's armies could learn from the Parthians? Carrhae forces have used similar tactics against conventional armies. What do you think modern warfare owes to the Parthians? The story of Crassus reminds us that behind every great historical event are individual human stories of loss and shattered dreams. The severed head that broke Rome wasn't just a military trophy. It was a son, a father's pride, and a symbol of how quickly triumph can turn to tragedy. In the end, Carrhae teaches us that the greatest victories and defeats are decided not by weapons or numbers, but by the human spirit. When Surena displayed Publius's head, he didn't just win a battle. He broke the psychological foundation of Roman power. and set in motion events that transformed the ancient world forever. The desert sands have long since covered the bones of those who died at Carrhae. But the lesson remains as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Ambition without wisdom, power without restraint, and the pursuit of glory at any cost can lead to consequences more terrible than any defeat on the battlefield. The severed head that broke Rome teaches us that in war, as in life, the deepest wounds are often not those that kill, but those who must live with what they have lost. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories from history that will blow your mind. Check out these other videos about ancient Rome's greatest battles and the men who shaped an empire. And don't forget to leave a comment telling us what historical battle you want us to cover next. Until next time, remember, history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about real people, real emotions, and real consequences that echo through time.